Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that infuriates a ton of vinyl collectors, and that is records as an investment. Every single time I talk about records as an investment, my comment section blows up. You're ruining vinyl by promoting this. People are ruining vinyl. Vinyl's being ruined. And I really strongly disagree with this, and if I'm missing something, go ahead and blow my comment section up again. But records as an investment is here to stay, and it is going to really start, I think personally, to take off in the next 10 years. I think we're going to see some extraordinary prices. But this week, we actually saw the most amount of money ever paid for just like a standard issue vinyl jazz record. Now, all records in general are making new records. You know, the most ever sold punk record, the most ever sold for a rock record. But this case is on the first true pressing of John Coltrane's Blue Train. A copy of this sold this past week on eBay from the Jazz Record Center in New York for $12,600. In full disclosure, I personally like Fred, the owner of the Jazz Record Center. I talked to him a little bit about this sale. I strongly dislike the gentleman who runs his eBay store. I think he's a giant tool. But that's a different story for a different video. This is about collecting records. So I actually talked to Fred about this a little bit after the sale, and I called him up and I congratulated him on it, because this is something that I've been calling for a long time, and that is give record collectors some respect. And by that I mean, and I mentioned this to Fred, comic book collectors, coin collectors, Magic the Gathering collectors, trading collectors, coins, just every kind of collectible toys you can possibly imagine. There's examples of $1 million, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 items. But when it comes to records, that's not been the case. And I just think that's preposterous. You take something like Action Comics #1, and it's rare, but high-grade examples go for millions of dollars. But you know what's also rare? High-grade examples of one of the most iconic jazz records of all time by one of the most iconic jazz artists of all time on one of the most iconic labels of all time. Why is this relegated until now $6,000? Even with this almost doubling the price of the last record, $12,600. It's like a bargain. I know it seems preposterous to you guys watching, but don't think of it as a record. Think of it as an investment in iconic Americana. And it's ridiculous that it's worth so little. I mean, cardboard posters of shows, concerts go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, they're starting to come up even more. But records have always been relegated to the back burner. But I called Fred and I talked to him on this. He's a really nice guy. I met him in person the last time I was in New York. Friendly, talked to you on the phone, and like any true diehard record collector, he'll get in the weeds with you. And one of the reasons I called him is because I wanted to pick his brain a little bit about this particular record, because this is one of those records that we don't really truly know the true first pressing. Record collectors over the last 20, 30, 40 years have kind of anointed what is a true first pressing of this particular record, but it's one of those records that there's some you wouldn't bet your life on it. With a time, you wouldn't bet your life on it while you were stepping into a time machine to go figure out what's a true first pressing. You know what I mean? There's too much gray area on that. And the reason I say that is there was multiple label transitions with Blue Note in general. So it's one of those things that to identify, there's many factors you have to look at to identify what constitutes a true Blue Note pressing. But in this case, we'll talk about the address. The first address on these 12-inch LPs, the 1500 series, was a Lexington Avenue address. Then it went to a New York address that ended with New York 23. Then the third incarnation was 47 West 63rd New York City. 63rd New York City. This is the record that was kind of on the cusp to where New York 23 and West 63rd, it was the last record that ever featured New York 23, and the last to ever feature New York 23. But the thing is, which doesn't make it clear cut, is you would think, well, a New York 23 would be first because it's the second label. But the problem with that is you're not going to find a true New York 23 on both sides. It's one of those weird anomalies to where you can either get it on side one or you can get it on side two, but you can't get it on the same side, which leads me to wonder, like, well, why is that? Nobody's ever seen a New York 23 on both sides. I would venture to say if you got a New York 23 on both sides, if this record's $12,600, that record would probably be 50 grand. And I'm not even exaggerating. I'm pretty sure that's a $50,000 record because nobody has seen one. And that would really, truly be considered the first. And I proposed that to Fred. I'm like, well, you would acknowledge that as a first, right? And even like, yeah. But the thing is, it's weird because if it's on side one, they consider it a first. If it's not, they consider it a second. So you're dealing with collectors. Collectors are finicky. A lot of things don't make sense. And when you're talking first pressing, we literally could be talking about the difference between an hour. Because say maybe they made 1,000 of them and they had, they made 1,000 of these things and it took one day to make 1,000 of the original run of this record. They might have had 500 address labels with one and 500 with the two and threw them in that hopper and made the records, and the difference between one versus the other is literally an hour apart. So you're really dealing with some finite minutia, but that's what is necessary when you're dealing with investment grade records. And there are a lot of investment grade records. And I'm going to kind of show you some that I kind of have squirreled away as records I listen to, but I'm very focused on the fact that these are going to be, we're going to be retiring with some of these records. This is a little bit of a savings account. That's my thinking on it. I could be wrong. 30 years from now, I could be going to retire and thinking to myself, whoops, should have bought some more dirt in the desert. But I don't think I'm wrong. That's why I'm doing it. But this is actually not a first pressing. This is what is collectively, by a margin of more than 50%, considered a second pressing, which is the second address. Really super clean copy. But yeah, just the addition of New York 23 on the end of that makes it from a couple $2,000, $3,000 record to a $12,600 record. But the industry is changing in general. We are now not only paying more for records, but we have finally started getting into the realm of grading records, which I think is in its infancy. There's about 3 companies that are grading now. I think the strongest candidate for grading right now is a company called Tuned In. They're out of Texas. I'm not completely sold on them. I would really like to see somebody of more credibility, like somebody like CGC come and start doing it. PSA start doing it. For a company that's not already a strong established grader, I think you need to be able to advertise you need to be able to advertise strong, high caliber people who are running it. And I think that's kind of where it's at. But I like the idea that we're finally getting into grading. It's something if you've been watching my YouTube channel, I've been calling it for years. We need to get it. We need to get that grading in line. It's the future. And I think it'll bring respectability to our hobby. And it doesn't, it's not going to mean that you're never going to be able to hear good copies of this record. This is not even the best sounding version of this record. It's not. I don't care what anybody says. I'm telling you what it is. This is not the best sounding version of this record. And I know because I have a few. Oh my God. I've got a couple here. These are all Blue Trains. I've got all kinds. Here's a second. I got 2 of those. This is a slightly later one if you were to ask me because of the construction of the cover. But I got that. I got a Liberty pressing from the 60s. Got 70s pressings. Well, we got 200 gram Quiax analog cut by Bernie Grumman, I believe. What is this? This is that's the stereo. This is the 200 gram mono. I've got the 4-disc single sided. What is this? I don't even know. Maybe this is Classic Records, a lighter one, 160 gram. Music Matters. What do I got here? I've got the blue vinyl Music Matters. That's just a collectible. I've got the SRX, which is the same mastering, but on the best vinyl formulation money can buy in 2024. This is the Analog Productions 45 RPM version. This is the second pressing of it when it was done at QRP. This is when it was done at RTI. Let's see, we've got the Tone Poets, which if you're going to say, hey, Mike, what's the best version of this? I'm going to tell you it's a Tone Poet. If you want a mono, if you want a stereo, get a Tone Poet. They're unbelievable. I think the stereo was on my top 100 imprint analog records you should own list. This one here. It's unbelievable. So people say, well, you know, it's ruining the hobby. Collectible records are ruining the hobby. Well, no, it's not. You know, you're not entitled. I mean, I would love to own the New York 23 of this record, but nobody's entitled to own it, and it's not, it doesn't need to be cheap for you to enjoy collecting records, because manufacturers now, man, they're putting out killer stuff. There is a long litany of killer sounding records out there that are affordable. That is one. This particular record, you can get all analog with a heavy-duty jacket, the works. Cut by Kevin Gray from the original master tape on significantly better equipment than Rudy was using back in the 50s. And they're better. They're more dynamic. They don't have compression. They don't have equalization boosting. They don't have the issues that the originals suffered from. Now, granted, the originals, special and magical, and I'm riddled with them. I love them. They're fantastic. You hold them in your hand and you're holding a piece of history. But it doesn't affect a collector for, you know, these things to be worth a fortune. So don't faux pas the collectibles. I mean, they're here to stay and they're going to get stronger. It's interesting because Blue Train is a record that I've talked about for years as being the album to own, the best, most desirable, and what should be the most expensive record because it's John Coltrane. I love Sonny Clark. I love Hank Mobley. I love some of these squirrely records that have been going for the money they have for years, but they don't have the cachet of John Coltrane. If it's 100 people, music people, walked into my record store and I named, you know, hey, can you tell me if you heard of these two names, John Coltrane or Sonny Clark? Almost, you know, the casual people, it's going to be John Coltrane. Even if you don't know squat about jazz, you've heard him. You've heard him on movies. You've heard him. He's just more of a established name for the non-jazz person. But even people getting into jazz, he's a starting point, kind of like Miles Davis. So that record is rare, and it deserves, I think, to be $12,600. And I think, truth be told, it's going to be a bargain. I've been saying it for years. It's funny. I'm going to show you guys some records that I've showed throughout the years, and you'll go back and watch videos of me talking about these things 3 or 4 years ago when they were half the price, and I'm like, they're not worth enough. But it's funny because a lot of these records, there's better sounding versions of out there, and you know, there's records for everybody. You know what I mean? There's records for investors, there's records for collectors, and there's records for just people who want to listen to music. Not one particular thing detracts from the others, but let me tell you, for a healthy record economy, it's good to have everything. And I don't bemoan the commoditization of these records. Some records, I think, truly deserve to be in the stratosphere of prices. When they're not going for crazy amount of money, I personally feel slighted. As a record collector, I feel slighted, and you should too. Like here, how about this? This is a turquoise, the very first incarnation of Led Zeppelin 1 from the United Kingdom with the original strikeout, the non-strikeout matrix. I talk about this on my shootout video. Actually, this I think was the winner. So this is, sometimes the earliest example are winners, but you know, that's what it is. But yeah, this is a record that, I mean, nice clean copies of this are going for $5,000 now. That wasn't the case back in the day. This is a good investable record. This is a record you can invest in, and you know, if Led Zeppelin stays relevant, which it doesn't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon, judging by, you know, all the teenagers that are coming and buying Led Zeppelin records, as long as they're relevant, this is a record that's investment grade. Now, everything is not investment grade. True first pressings are investment grade. If you want to throw money in records, stuff like this is where you throw it in. You don't throw it into modern reissues. You don't throw your money into manufactured collectibles. And I try to encourage people to think that way, because some stuff is cool. But here's an example of a modern record that's very collectible, and it's a manufactured collectible though. That is this Taylor Swift 1989. This particular version, I think they only did 3,200 and something. It's numbered on the back. This is the record store day version. These are good. This isn't something I'd park money into, though. But if you're a Taylor Swift fan and you got to have everything, that's different. They did 3,750 of these. I want to say this is her second most rarest record because the original Reputation, they did 3,000 and they were numbered, I believe. So this was 3,750. So being that it's numbered, I guess you could say this might be her second hardest to get record, although there's probably promos and other things that are even more rare. But this kind of ticks off the box, not because it's a true first pressing, but it's a more modern record. But I mean, like besides the Beatles and maybe not even the Beatles, like who has more fans than Taylor Swift? This is like Money in the Bank at this point. Every time Taylor Swift is being shown during a Chiefs game, I just think to myself, oh boy, I wonder how much my record store day 1989 went up today. Then you got records like from my childhood that are just iconic. Something like this is a true first pressing of Tools and Nima. Actually, and this is really cool because this has the original receipt on there. Check that out. This was bought September 24th, 1996 for $10.99 from the warehouse in Mesa. How awesome is this? $10.99. Look at that, beautiful. Like a record like this by a band like Tool, also a very collectible band. Just going to keep going up. Like this is a perfect example too of a record that should be slabbed. And no one's going to open this. I have open copy. No one's going to open this. This is a collectible at this point. People aren't cracking open this record. One of, I think, like, God, if you go to buy a print by Andy Warhol in the form of a lithograph or a painting, or, you know, you're dealing with millions of dollars. But here is a beautiful Andy Warhol designed Velvet Underground record. Now, granted, they're expensive, but they're a couple $1,000s expensive, not millions of dollars expensive. Again, a record that needs, I think it needs to be respected more. Here's another example of a record that can never be replaced. They make it a gazillion times, but here is the first true pressing of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Actually, with the rare shrink, blue cover, but rare shrink. A lot of people don't realize that some of these were actually in shrink with the sticker on the shrink. Also a winner of my shootout video, but sometimes that happens. Records like these have been going absolutely bananas for years. More investment grade records. Like how much more investment grade can you get than this? One of the best bands of all time, one of the most heavily collected bands of all time. And here we have their very first release. So the very first musical release by one of the greatest bands of all time, Nirvana, Love Buzz. They only made 1,000 of these as well. There's 1,000 numbered copies and there's some red slash promos. These are actually one of each, but minty copies as well. But like rare, super rare, highly collectible. These have been going up. When I acquired these were like in the $3,000 range. I'm thinking I'm seeing copies going closer to 10 now. But I think that's too little. These are iconic. These should be $50,000 today. I truly believe that. And not because if they were $50,000, I'd sell them. I still would be in a hurry to sell them. Punk has really been leading the way for collectibles. And really, when you think about punk leading the way for collectible records, it's really been one band, and that's been the Misfits. These Misfits singles are just ridiculously expensive. This is the kind of the third incarnation of Bullet with the first record, but the second sleeve, which was on the second version, which is this sleeve and a red record. Apparently Danzig had a couple, like 100 copies left, and he threw the original record in this sleeve. But these go for nutso money, and they're getting crazier. I talk to guys all the time that have these in their showcase in their record store for, an original Bullet for a couple $100 20 years ago. But, I think collectible records are here to stay. But don't get fooled up. Modern records in general are not going to be very collectible. Unless one thing is ticked, and that is it's a band that's super collected like Taylor Swift. It is considered the most desirable pressing of a record, meaning it is sonically fantastic. If it's a record that's sonically fantastic and it holds at the top echelon of the one that the audiophiles want, the one that the sound-conscious collectors want, it's going to be an expensive, valuable record. But there's a risk with that, and that is the next one out could always sound better. But so you got to be careful. With modern records, you have to be careful. But when they make limited things like the Taylor Swift, there's so many Taylor Swift collectors, kind of like the Beatles, that there's going to be people just lining up in droves to pluck out that money. And I think Taylor Swift, if she maintains her stability collectible-wise, you know, wait till all these people that are buying these records. Right now, a lot of them are teenagers or in their 20s. Wait till they're in their 40s and they're in their peak earning years. If she's got the staying power, like it seems like she does, those records are going to be nutso dollars. It's just going to be crazy. A lot of times you don't see the true collectability of a band until their audience hits peak earning potential. That's when you kind of find out, you know. That's why those punk records were so repressed for so long. I think it really took people, A, knowing how rare they were, and B, people having the money. So now we kind of have both things solved, so the prices are through the roof. But you will never go wrong with investing in high-grade sealed records, high-grade first pressings of desirable records. It's here to stay, and I think you're going to see between the record grading that's just, like I say, in its infancy, and the new record sales that keep taking place, I think we're on the way up. And I don't really think it affects many people, but it's good for the hobby. People want to know that, you know, if they're spending, people want to have faith in what they're buying. People have been talking so many years about it's a fad, it's a fad, it's a fad. With that kind of mentality, that kind of thing has kind of made, I think, prices be repressed for so long. You hear so many people talking about the record fad, the record fad, the record fad, and then people are like, you know, they're not going to invest in something that they feel is a fad. But I think as time goes on and the prices starts going up, and that brings legitimacy. That also kind of goes to dispel people from thinking this is just a fad. When records start trading hands for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, I think less people can say derogatory things about the hobby. But you know, a lot of people again don't like investors, and I don't know what the logic is. Like, do you think that if there was no investors for this, you're just going to like stumble into these Pink Floyds and Led Zeppelins in like Goodwills? That's not going to happen. And if it does, you'll spend $20,000 in gas to be lucky to find that $5,000 record, because they're just rare to begin with. That's why they're desirable, and you know, go for the money they do, because they're very, very rare. But records like that Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, that was one of those when I was a kid, and before the internet, you would go in a record store and they'd be like, oh, the Dark Side of the Moon you want is the one with the blue triangle. And I was like, the thing, it was only like a myth to me, you know. And every time I would go to a garage sale or a blue triangle, no, blue, like, what the hell is this blue triangle people keep talking about? Never heard of it. I keep hearing people talk about it, but I've never seen the damn thing. And then, you know, so certain things have been legitimately collectible and desirable for a long time. But if you're buying records to collect, I want to steer you guys. There's multiple purposes. There's records to invest in, records to collect because you're like band artists, which can be an investment as well. And then there's records to listen to. And you never know. I mean, modern records shoot up in value all the time. Every record store day, there's some record that I don't anticipate anybody caring about that is going for $200 a month after record store day. And then the record I thought everybody might want was selling for half a retail. So nobody has a crystal ball, and you don't know any of this stuff for sure. And again, these are all my best educated advice. But I truly feel that these things are going to be collectible in the future. But again, I'm not, I don't work for Charles Schwab or anything. I own a record store. So please, use this advice somewhat cautiously. But I'm betting on it. As you can see. But yeah, tell me what you guys think about this. I hope people put two and two together, that big prices means more credibility for this hobby. And you know, look, if you're like me and your wife is saying, what the hell are you buying all these damn records for? You might be able to show her Blue Train, like, hey, $12,600 this thing just sold for. Hey, we might be retiring on this. You know what I mean? Maybe at the very least, it'll get your significant other off your back from bringing home so many damn records all the time. Hasn't worked for me, but maybe it'll work for you. Good luck. All right, guys, check us out online at theingroove.com. Until next time.